So at long last, after months of buildup, Goku is finally tapping into, I guess you can call it mastered, perfected, but really it's just Ultra Instinct, Migate no Gokui, and we've been getting a lot of questions about the meaning of the word, because there are several different translations for what this actually is. Originally, when it was translated, many referred to it as the Mastery of Self movement. Others called it the Secret of Selfishness. And then when it actually premiered on Crunchyroll using the Toei subs, presumably, they call it Ultra Instinct. Then all the video games like Dokkan and Xenoverse are now calling it Ultra Instinct or Ultra Instinct Omen, depending on what it is. So I want to discuss what those words, Migate no Gokui, actually mean and clear up a lot of misconceptions about kind of the original, I guess, the language barrier, right, between English and Japanese. And who else to bring on here than the legendary translator himself? Please welcome back HERMS. Hey, HERMS.
Hello.
Let's talk about Migate no Gokui. So one time we were on the phone, and I asked you this question, and I hate to have you repeat yourself, but this time it's going to be for an actual audience, not just me. And you explained to me, you broke down what the word actually means. Why? Okay, what if you were the one translating this, if you were in charge and they told you subtitle this episode, would you call it Ultra Instinct? Where did they get the idea for calling it that? And is it correct or incorrect? What is the whole thing behind these words?
Well, okay, so there's 3 levels to this, I guess you could say. I mean, this is by far probably the most confusing to translate term that we've had in Dragon Ball in recent memory. You know, with most things, it'll just be in English half the time already, even in Japanese.
Yeah.
Like with most of his previous transformations. I mean, there's the Kaioken, which, I mean, for one, they just leave untranslated. And even if you were to translate it, it's relatively straightforward, where it's just the King of World Fist, named after Kai or King Kai.
Right.
But anyway, with this though, so there's 3 levels where the words used in this name in Japanese, they have a literal meaning, or they have a meaning which is what they're usually used for in Japanese. But then if you break it down, like there's wordplay going on because they're in this context, they're being used to mean something which is actually more literal than what they're usually used to mean. So that's confusing enough as on its own.
Right.
And then the official translation from the Toei subtitles, Ultra Instinct, is like as a pretty liberal translation all around. It's like, essentially, it seems like they just they wanted something that would be marketable in English and be catchy. And so they kind of did something, they kind of gloss over all the wordplay in Japanese because, I mean, I guess quite logically, since none of that really translated into English anyway. But yeah, so breaking it down, so Migate, this is where the wordplay kicks in. Usually it's used to mean selfish or egotistical. And when you break it down though, so kate on its own is selfish or doing things the way you want them to. And like kate ni suru is just to do things your own way. And then mi is body, but it's literally body, but it's also often used by extension to refer to yourself. And we see this also with recently with 17's attack, him sacrificing himself. The term they use is sutemi, and this is literally to throw away your body. But in this case, it's not. They mean throwing away yourself rather than your physical body. It's like the more general concept of who you are, sacrificing yourself for others. And then, so it's that same more abstract use of the word me, body, which is how migate is usually used to mean. And so, again, it's just doing things how you want them to do, your own way. And so by extension, that means being selfish or egotistical. But the big joke is that when you break it up like that to have body on one side and then on its own on the other, then that has the pun of meaning your body moving on its own, which ties into what Whis explained when he's training Goku and Vegeta, where he's saying you have to train yourself so that your body can react on its own without you having to think conscious thoughts, because conscious thoughts, there's a limit to how fast you can react. And so, like when you go back to Whis's actual, like the wording he uses when he's explaining this concept, it's essentially kind of the same thing where he says like having your body, in this case, karada, which is another Japanese word for body, but you know, but he uses kateni, and the word, in this case, he uses handan, like having your body deciding on its own. But like essentially, the whole joke is that it takes Whist's explanation and condenses it down into this single word. So I guess, okay, so at this point, like, do you have any, like, does that explanation make sense? Because this is all kind of complicated.
It does make sense, and that's one thing I wanted to point out to everybody is that when it comes to translating Japanese to English, we've said this before, you know, it's complex because it's not like word for word, it's syllables. You know, we've talked about that, you and I, on previous videos, and you've talked about it on Kanzenshu podcasts, and really all throughout your time here. And it's hard to do word for word translations, which is why, like, when a spoiler will come out, you and some of the other translators will have slightly different words, but they're not that different. They kind of mean the same thing. And I remember when this first came out, Mastery of Self Movement, I remember somebody, I don't remember if it was Ken, I forget who it was, referred to it as the secret of egoism or something like that. So that kind of goes with it. But it's interesting, though, because you're talking about, like, something that's pretty much like self-sacrificial, like what 17 did, but it's also...
Well, yeah, in his case, it was sacrificial because it's sutemi, to throw yourself away. Whereas this is kind of the opposite, where it's like to do what you want to do.
Which is weird because, like, the word selfish, right, is like, you know, like, I think it coincides with the word greed, but in this connotation, it's more so, like we talked about before with Kendamu and whatnot. Ultra Instinct or Migate no Gokui is pretty much like the Bruce Lee, you know, it's a tribute to, like, Jeet Kune Do and how your body has to move on its own. You know, it's why am I stuttering right now?
Reflexive?
Reflexive, thank you. Reflexive, not you don't think when you do it. That's what I meant to say. So do you think, based on what you said, are you telling me you think that Toei and whatever, the company, Bandai too, I guess, right? They chose Ultra Instinct because it's just easier to write Ultra Instinct Goku on, like, a Dokkan card or on, like, a character select screen versus Mastery of Self Movement Goku. Like, I agree that Ultra sounds awesome, but we've also seen the Japanese use the word Ultra, like Ultraman, like for Ultraman, right? Like, they've used the English version of that word. So that's why it kind of caught me off guard when they were using the word Ultra Instinct.
Yeah, and I guess that brings us to the second half of the term, the Goku-E part. And so when you break that down, this is another thing where there's, like, a difference between what the characters on their own mean and then what they are, when you put them together, how they're typically used. Because Goku, and we'll probably have to get into this later, because this is not the name of the central character. This is a completely different thing, which, you know, Japanese has a lot of homophones or semi-homophones. You know, things that sound the same but mean completely different things. And so this is a case of something that even in Japanese, it actually looks very different from Japanese perspective because it's written with different characters. It has an elongated U sound, Goku has the character name Goku has an elongated U sound, Goku, whereas this is short. It's
Goku-E.
Yeah,
right?
And the E is also a separate character. Anyway,
and please don't get mixed up. We're not talking about Kui from, like, the Frieza saga. Or I just want to clarify that. Also, Herms, I wanted to let the people know because this is something that I think a lot of the dub fans, and I'm not talking about just the English dub. I'm talking about also Spanish, other languages. Everybody refers to him as Goku, but the correct way to say his name is actually Goku. Like, you have to. It's weird. You're supposed to emphasize the Goku. And I think they did it in the Spanish dub, but you know how everybody just calls him Goku, but it's actually Goku, you know, and that's something that I think is lost in translation too.
Yeah, it's something we kind of gloss over where, yeah, it's written, and the character name is written with two separate characters, and so in Japanese they kind of pronounce those two separate characters, you know, on their own, like Goku, whereas in English we kind of slur it together. And again, it's like they lengthen the U for his name, which is why it's sort of similar to in English when we say you as in referring to someone else. And that's kind of why sometimes in a lot of Japanese merchandise they will spell Goku's name Gokou.
That's right, Bandai.
They're trying to reference the way in English we write you with YOU.
And remember, some of the old fan subs spelled it Gokuh or Gokuu.
Yeah, and
back in the day.
And again, yeah, that's another way of indicating that elongated vowel in English is with an H on the end. And for whatever reason, that's not what Funimation chose to do with Goku, but with Goki from Yu Yu Hakusho, they actually, I believe they spell his name with an H, just I think in part to make his name not look almost exactly the same as Goku.
Right.
And, the main character in Shaman King is Yo, which is again a Y-O elongated O sound, and like the Viz manga translation, they put an H, they spelled Y-O-H. I assume because it was just Y-O, it would look kind of weird, and like it'd be a little too short for a main character name.
Right.
So again, like how to adapt these things, how to spell them in English, it's all kind of, it depends on the context, and like it varies from circumstance to circumstance. And if you try and create like one rule to apply in all cases, it probably won't work too well.
But Gokui is not Goku. We got to clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah. So forget everything I just said, because so as far as the name of this technique is concerned, the Goku is a completely different thing. It's the character for extreme, and so it's like used also for like on its own. It's like it can mean like a pole. So like the North Pole and the South Pole in Japanese, they use the same character, but instead of Goku, in that case it's read as Kyoku. So South Pole is non-Kyoku. And so you can see like a pole is an extreme. It's an extreme, the southern extremity of the planet Earth. And so
like the farthest point.
Yeah, and so that you take that same meaning and you can apply like an extreme version of something, and then by that extension to master something. So you see, it's like the same character refers to kind of the same general idea, but in different levels of literalness. Like it can everything from a literal physical extremity to the abstract concept of perfecting something. And so in this case, it's more like the perfecting something. And so that's the Goku part. And then the E part is the character for like will or intention. And so you like the literal meaning seems to be like an extreme will, which kind of would seem to tie into the idea behind this technique of like your body moving on its own. If you see
mastery of self movement.
Yeah.
Right.
But apart from that, like the way this word is typically used in Japanese though is to refer to, this is where the secret part comes in. It's used to refer to like the extreme, like the ultimate techniques of a particular field of study. So when we translate it as secret, it's not just like a common secret, like, oh, like just don't tell your mother that I crashed the car, or something like that. It's a bigger secret. It's it's like something you only tell to the initiates of your cult, or that kind of thing. Or it's like King Kai teaching Goku the Kaioken.
Deep.
Like the secret technique.
Yeah, it's spicy.
Yeah, kind of. And so essentially it's the kind of secret, it's the sort of thing which is known, it's secret in the sense that it's the sort of thing that is known to experts and not to noobs, essentially, if people still use the term noob.
Yeah, and that's where the word mastery comes from, I guess.
Yeah, and so that's why I think I was using, my translation that I was using before Ultra Instinct was using the official subs, I was using Mastery of Self-Movement, and then that's why other people are using secret, because it's kind of, it's almost like...
it's like the word means two different things, kind of.
It's like it's a big concept, and it's a kind of a broad concept, which can be... It's like if you take all the different translations and then put them together, it's like each translation can only capture a part of what the word means in Japanese.
So what you're telling me is that the literal translation would be the secret mastery of selfish movement. Is that what you're telling me right now?
Sort of. Like, okay, so again, I need to stress that, like in normal circumstances, like if you see migate, it's going to mean selfish. Like in day-to-day life, it doesn't have anything to do with dodging punches or anything. It's just doing what you want to do. And it's in this special circumstance in Dragon Ball where they're kind of like taking they're taking this extremely literal meaning of like what each character means on its own, and then like I said, it's essentially wordplay. And it's almost like in English, if we were to say like reflex, if we were to use the word reflex, but say like in this context, it means to flex your arm twice. Like that kind of thing where it's like, normally that's not what people mean when they say reflex. But if you think about it, like reflex could mean that.
Yeah, right.
Or
reflex.
Like,
see, what a trip, man. What a wordplay. That's a lot of wordplay.
Or like, I think in the sitcom Friends, where they have Joey say like, the important part of acting is reacting, but this does not mean acting again.
Right? Yeah. So, so what you're basically telling people, for those who don't know Japanese, and I'm certainly not fluent in it whatsoever, is that in Japanese, when you have a character and you add another character or characters to that character, it could almost retroactively change the entire meaning of the first character.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of context where if you look at a word like that's made up of several characters, if you take the definition of each character on its own and like combine, like that's not necessarily going to tell you what the word is actually means or how it's actually used in conversation. It can help. A lot of times it will help, but it's not the same thing as knowing what the word means. Like again, in English, bicycle it literally means two wheels, which relates to what it means. Like obviously that gives you a clue of what a bicycle is, but on its own you could also, like, you're not automatically going to say like, okay, a bicycle is a thing you ride around on. You could also, like, you need further cultural context to know what the word actually means, and it's sort of the same thing in it's exactly the same thing in Japanese.
It's just funny to me because, like, Ultra Instinct, like, where'd they even would Ultra be like their way of combining like mastery and secret? Because Ultra, I don't see that being a synonym for mastery.
Well, as near as I can work out, the Ultra is supposed to come from the Goku part, because Goku, if you take it as an extreme to Ultra.
Yeah.
But that does get into the thing where it's like it's like the Ultra corresponds to the second half of the Japanese phrase, and then the instinct kind of corresponds to the first half of the thing in Japanese. Maybe. Like, it seems like they're translating migate as instinct. If you go from, okay, migate, your body reacting on its own, which kind of ties into the idea of instinct.
Yeah, it's like a more complex, it's like a simplified translation, like you said, right? You could go deep into each, like, syllable, but Ultra Instinct is so are you okay with it? Because I know, like, personally, I know there are some translations that you're not a big fan of. Is Ultra Instinct fine with you, or do you think that just calling it that, when years go by and we're all long gone, the Dragon Ball fans are gonna not understand what it really means on a deeper level?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, when it first appeared in the subtitles, I was pretty surprised because, as we've been discussing, it's a very liberal translation. But yeah, it's definitely grown on me because I think it is catchy in English. It's fun to say, which I think is what they were going for. They wanted something that worked as an English term, whereas the original term works as a kind of Japanese term. And
right.
I mean, and it does seem like, as far as all signs indicate, that this is going to be the official name of it in English across the board.
Right.
It's been used in the subtitles on Crunchyroll and all the other places where it's streamed, and it's been used in all the videos so far. And I mean, so most likely it'll be used in the Viz translation of the manga, and probably, I mean, when Funimation gets there in the dub, they'll probably use this. So as long as if it's being used as the English name and all these things, then I think it's probably more convenient to just go along with it, for the sake of clarity, if nothing else.
And also for mouth flaps too, right? And that whole thing, because mastery of self movement is so long to say,
And yeah, it would be a different thing. Like it'd be weird if it turns out that like if Viz does mastery of self movement or secret of selfishness or something, and then the dub does something else. Like it'd be kind of like if it turns out that like each version is going to do its own different way of translating it, then maybe I would go with my own thing. But as it stands right now, like, it seems easier to just go with what they're doing in English. But on that note, I believe that the Portuguese subs, on Crunchyroll, you can have the English subtitles, they have Portuguese subtitles, they have French, they have a couple different languages. But I believe that the Portuguese subtitles literally, they translate it more directly. They do the Portuguese equivalent of Secret of Selfishness or something like that.
I've got to check out the Spanish ones, because after we get done recording, I'm going to check that out, because I'm wondering how they translate it, because Ultra isn't even a word in Spanish. It's really not. So I'm thinking they might do the same thing, where in the Spanish version, they're going to call it like, El Maestro de Movimiento or something like that, which is mastery of movement. They could call it something like that, which, again, it's not wrong. It's just, it's like you said, this is a very complex translation. Like, we've had a few of these, but this one to me struck me because remember, man, you and all the other translators had a different way of saying it, and it's like people have to understand that Japanese is not an easy language. Would you say that Japanese is the most difficult language to learn if you're an English speaker?
It is, and yeah, it is. The people who classify languages and the difficulty to learn it, they place Japanese and Chinese and Korean and I think some of the Middle Eastern languages, they're in like the hardest category to learn if you're a native English speaker. So it's like the easiest category would be something like French or Spanish, things that are fairly
Latin
close
based.
to English, Romance languages. And then I think after that is like Russian, and then, in the highest category that is Japanese and Chinese and those Eastern languages.
That's why you're here. Well, folks, that's the explanation. Check out HERMS, of course, on Twitter. Tippy top translator, him and Julian are N1 certified. We have great translators in our fandom, but I think these guys are the tippy top, also with experience as well, too. And I want to also plug HERMS' second Twitter, Who HERMS, because HERMS is watching not just the new Doctor Who, he's watching all the classic Doctor Who as well from beginning to now, right?
Yeah, so I started with the 60s, and I had to go through all the ones where they don't even have the video anymore because they junked it. In the 70s, before VHS was invented, we're never going to need this footage ever again. We might as well get rid of it.
I heard about this, yeah.
And but the odd thing is that the audio still exists because people just fans would record the audio. So if you go on iTunes, all of the missing stories that you can actually download them as audiobooks, where it's like the original, it's the actual original soundtrack, all the spoken dialogue, all the music and sound effects, and they just add in narration, so to explain the missing visual elements. But otherwise, it's pretty as close as you can get to the original thing, I guess. Anyway, so I listened to those. And I watched everything. So I made my way through the 60s, and now I finally finished the 70s.
Yep. Well, it's not just the new show. That's the what I was trying to tell everybody. It's also the classic ones, too. That's HERMS' second Twitter, and, of course, the main one is anime. Anything else you want to tell the folks before we get out of here?
I guess that's about it. Oh, yeah. No.
All right. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, yeah, and one day, I've also done my New Year's resolution to try and keep a webcomic going all year, but I have to get back to that.
Right, well, good luck with that as well. We all support you on that, and will you be doing a Super rewatch in April?
Yeah, that's my plan is once Super ends to do essentially the same, if anyone remembers my rewatch of Dragon Ball to Z and GT from 2016, or just do the same format for that with Super.
Right, yeah, well, it's going to be, there's some painful episodes to go through, but there's some good stuff too. So thank you for being here.
Sure.
All right, we'll talk to y'all later.